I have a confession to make. I suck at coming up with the cold opens, especially when I'm just sort of winging it, so 20k Q&A, let's go! This video made possible thanks to the continuing support of viewers, patrons, and PayPal pals like you. Thanks! Hi, welcome back to the channel, and in this video we're just gonna take it easy today. Answer some questions, talk about what's new, like my merch. In the new merch store, we still have stickers and mugs, but we also have a little notebook and all kinds of shirt options. Regular t-shirts, some type of tank, and even a sweater. Ooh, so soft. With that out of the way, let's get to the questions. And I've roughly clumped them into different topic area sort of things, and I front-loaded the more emotional or heavy questions, and so by the end of the video, we're talking about cats, and it's going to be a good time. So I will make use of the timestamps, so if you're more interested in one topic than another, you can just jump around and also miss heavier stuff. Okay. Und asks, how's the weather? The weather's good. One of the nice things about Northern California, the part we're in, is it's winter, and it's still pretty nice. It's not dipping below freezing, it's not warmer on Mars here, like, it's a good temperature, and it's looking like this winter might be a little bit on the wet side, which suits me perfectly fine. I like rain, cloudy showers, just overcast days, that's my vibe. Sunshine, not so much, so I'm stoked if we're getting some rain. Kicking off the irreversible damage-ish questions is Aaron, who asks what led me to consider covering irreversible damage, and also, I know you put a poll up, but why was it on the poll? Irreversible damage came at a good window for me. Good isn't the best word, opportune, in between finishing up 12 Rules for Life and starting Beyond Order. So I had a couple months there before Beyond Order came out, and I wanted to fill the slot. I wanted to do something similar that I did to 12 Rules to something else in the interim between the two projects, and Irreversible Damage was, just really starting to make the rounds when I started, and it seemed like there was a lot of not good research happening. And since we are about research and digging into the references and stuff, I thought it would be a good fit for me to talk about. I also thought it would be useful to lend my perspective on this as somebody who does experimental research stuff and has a background in that and how to talk about the research, as well as somebody who is an ally but not trans or non-binary myself. So just, hey, cisgender person here, this book is fucked up. I also thought I'd be able to do it in that time window between the two books, so I wouldn't have two overlapping series like I did. Live and learn. Ongrim15 is asking for any thoughts I have about the new WPATH Standards of Care draft, and I haven't read through the entire draft. I've just read the adolescent part when the public response window was open to say my piece. So I understand a lot of the concern about what the new Standards of Care is going to look like, given the sort of shift in the cultural space and research space, given Littman's rapid onset gender dysphoria and Shrier's book, among other things. I think paying attention to what these standards of care are going to be as a community is good, given the extensive history of medical gatekeeping and the change in the space. The tweet that brought this to my attention really was somebody pointing out that the adolescent section cites Littman's research without having referenced arguments against it. So I read through the section, and yeah, Littman, rapid onset gender dysphoria, is talked about, but it is also counter-argued. It isn't counter-argued by published things, and I did leave a comment like, hey, there is a experiment that failed to replicate this, like that seems really important to put into this discussion. Then reading through it, I don't think the ROGD really impacted the standards of care. I could be wrong, but that was just my reading of it. Like one of these standards where it seemed like ROGD could impact things, and maybe it did, was talking about parents needing to be part of the decision-making process for what treatments are done and all of that. But I seem to remember it also having a provision where if the parents are obstructive or not acting in the child's best interests, then there are procedures in place for kids to get the treatment that they need. So yes, ROGD is in the WPATH Standards of Care draft for adolescents at this point, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. Because this singular paper has had such an impact on the cultural discussion of trans and or non-binary youth and their treatment, as well as state and country policy, it needs to be in there. Not having it in there would be like ignoring the huge transphobic elephant in the room. Like, it needs to be in there. It needs to be talked about, but I do agree that the contextualization of the research, as well as failures to replicate and arguments that people have made against the research itself, also needs to be in there a bit larger, but I think it does have its place there. Lula Sings is an autistic trans boy who's going to be moving into an assisted living facility for people with intellectual disabilities. This facility, under Texas state law, is placing him in a room with somebody of the same birth sex. He requested an AFAB roommate who is trans, gender fluid, or non-binary, and was told no, that's not going to happen because there's nobody else like that in this group. What do I think about the situation? I think that situation is pretty messed up, and it's probably not going to get better for a bit. In an ideal world, in whatever sort of facility, people will get to have a say in who their roommate is, within constraints, because sometimes hospitals or whatever get full. But in the current medical landscape of the US, getting any sort of dignity in your treatment seems like a very lucky thing to happen and not the standard at all. I think people's accommodations for requests like this should be honored, as it can just reduce discomfort and other bad things from happening, but that's not the world we live in, and it's fucked up. Pivoting now to the Peterson-ish sort of questions, we have Jackson Fell asking if I have heard of The Devil and His Due by Troy Parfit. Yes, I have heard of The Devil and His Due by Troy Parfit. Lucien would like to know if I think the psychodynamic movement has had some positive aspects or if it's only negative. I think, on the whole, the psychodynamic school of doing counseling and psychology has had a net positive impact. There are certainly some negative things that have come out of these approaches, but I think, big enough scale, the positives outweigh the negatives. We can't overlook the historical impact of people like Freud and Jung. The field of psychology wouldn't be what it is today, better or worse, if those two and other depth psychologists hadn't done their thing. It brought psychiatry into more interested about what the patient thinks is going on, which is huge. It's not just a doctor deciding what's going on without even really interacting with what's going on inside their head, which seems like it should be a basic thing, but it took us a while to get there. So yes, probably a net positive, even with the negatives. Lectaval was watching the original 12 Rules for Life series and got to, I believe that was Rule 6, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world, where incels and the Columbine guys came up a lot, and they're wondering if this is something I would make videos about or just better not to talk about those. I think the disenfranchised, involuntarily celibate group is somebody to pay attention to and study and talk about and figure out. That said, I don't think I'm necessarily the person to do that. I was comfortable doing it in the 12 Rules series where Pearson was talking about that group because there was more context to be had in what he was saying. And at that level, I am comfortable reading through the research and providing that extra context. But for a fully fleshed out series, I'm not sure I'm the best fit for that, given my training was on the experimental cognitive side of things and not the more cultural counseling sociology end of things. And I think a lot of the issues and problems faced by this group is better discussed by somebody with that type of background than with mine. Megashawn is asking if I am aware of America's Tough Love programs for troubled youth and the abuse and humiliation that happens in programs claiming to help troubled youth, and if I am, what's my say on this? I am aware of these types of programs. Even I think Dr. Phil's The Ranch would qualify as this, if people who've been there are to be believed. I think these camps or programs are setting up situations that are just rife for abuse. You're taking a youth who is troubled for any number of reasons and shipping them off to the care of probably strangers. And the parents are signing over decision-making ability to these camps and are told, your kid is probably going to want to come home and say that they're going to do things different, but don't believe them. That's part of the process, and we just got to get them through and they'll be running shipshape. Which is setting up or possibly adding to a distrust by the parents on the kid and just If the kid is experiencing a bad time and is trying to tell their parents that, like, hey, I'm being abused here, their parents are set up to not believe them. A lot of these programs seem to be set up with little to no actual oversight for how the kids are being run through them, and outcome measures aren't really the best tracked, and it's bad. It's not the way to help kids. Victoria would like to know what I think of the "what if psychiatry is fake" question. I think that question is missing some really important details about how medicine and treating people is advanced. For any of the sciences, even in medicine, there is this level of acceptance that what we think of as correct today may not necessarily hold in the future. Our current understanding of what psychological disorders are and what the best way to treat them is something that's almost certainly going to change as medicine advances. And maybe we'll reach a point with our understanding of the brain and how it works to be able to really understand the cause of the different psych disorders that cause people distress and harm. But even then, I don't think psychiatry would necessarily be fake. The mind interacts with the body, and the interface where that happens, sometimes problems arise, and that's where psychiatry comes in. I'm curious for the context of this question because it's not really one I've seen seriously or professionally. It's something I've seen on random internet videos or web boards or whatever, where somebody comes in saying that, psychiatric medicines aren't helping anybody, they're actually doing harm. Psychological disorders are a means of control by the medical establishment, what have you. I'm not saying that certain psychological disorders historically haven't been used as a means of controlling other people, because that's absolutely happened, and hopefully we're getting better about that, but you never know. But serious, credible psychology, I don't think generally floats the idea that psychiatry as a profession is fake. Transitioning us between the Peterson stuff and more general research stuff, the question from Fallstar is, when I sit down to read an actually academic, serious work, do I still have my Peterson hair trigger active? Is it active when I read non-academic works? So I try not to, and I'm not always successful at it, but I do try to be mindful of how I'm approaching something, even Peterson's papers. Given the nature of reading these papers, it's not possible to do a blind reading of something. Like, the authors are known, and if you don't know who the author is, by the time you finish reading the introduction, you can probably figure out at least a couple of the authors. I try to give everything a fair shake, even if I am a little bit harder on Dr. P, just given what he's doing with the implications of his research. But generally, I try to give everything a fair shake. DJ Spooky Jim is asking, what are some of my favorite reads in the past year, if I have any, and any in my field of study? Here comes the awkward truth of things. So in grad school, it was told to us that there's this general thing that happens where you come into grad school a voracious reader, just polishing off books left and right. And by the time you exit grad school, you're sort of burned out on reading, because it is a lot of reading to get the PhD done. Hypothetically, over time, your drive to read back to the same levels would increase as you recover from the process. And that's a fine theory, and I'm sure it happens for a lot of people, but I never really recovered. I can still sit down and read a book in earnest, especially when I'm flying somewhere. That's when I've read pretty much anything I've read since grad school is on or waiting for a plane. So there's that, and then there's also just physical discomfort associated with reading for me at this point. So prior to getting my wisdom tooth removed, I would do a lot of reading in bed or in awkward angles in sofas and things, and since the nerve thing became a thing, I can't really read for longer than a half hour, maybe an hour tops, without triggering a flare-up. And I suck at paying attention to auditory stuff if there's not a visual component tied to it, so Audible's not really an option. So yeah, I don't have any books that I read this past year, or ones that I recommend. Sorry. But to build on that answer just a little bit, we have this question from the Internet Gnome, who is asking if I think there are any good lecturers or writers in the psychology philosophy interchange vein that Peterson is trying to straddle. This I have more of an answer to, although it's gotten complicated by things, poor life choices, and friend choices. So Chomsky, one of the fathers of cognitive psychology, is certainly a recommendation. Another recommendation would be Christoph Koch. This is The Quest for Consciousness, one of the older books, but I think he has more recent ones that are on my to-do list. Steph wants to know if I could do research with any animal, real or imaginary, what would I choose? I mean, cuttlefish and octopuses are great. I love them. I think I'd probably go with an alien species who seems very cognitively different from how we work and how other animal life on this planet works. I think that would be cool and informative. So like the aliens from Arrival or Slaughterhouse-5, where they have a different relationship with time than we do, and just seeing the implications and consequences and cognitive processing differences that comes about because of that. Sorcerer is wanting to know if I've had any opportunity to look into anything like cognitive data among musicians, especially those who improvise alone or with others. Nope. Sorry, afraid not. I have a good friend who is really into improv and was trying to do outreach sort of stuff with improv in different spaces without doxing her. So I think there is research on it, I'm just not familiar with it. Working with AuScript kind of bit me in the ass because in editing I realized I skipped a question because I reordered them. So the question from Maria, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, is asking for my opinion on Dr. Matei's work. Would I be willing to do an analysis of his books? So I'm not really familiar with his work because he didn't do cognitive and that's where my bread and butter is. But looking over his research and his work, he seems to have done some good stuff. I totally agree that the war on drugs has done far more harm than good and is penalizing those who need the most help. I don't want to say I would never cover his books on my channel, but they aren't a priority, at least in the near future. Marocat just wants to know something about nostalgia and if there's studies that show how nostalgia affects judgment or parental bias. Off the top of my head, I know that generally we tend to get more positive as we age, so things remembered aren't remembered as negatively, and just a more cheery outlook as you advance in age. So I could see that playing in with nostalgia and thinking that the past was all sunshine and rainbows when it was really just a struggle bus from start to end, just your perspective on it changed. I could also see it impacting judgment in that you think things are getting worse and you want to try to return things to how it was when you were a kid, and that impacting your decision making in the now. The martial arts nerd would like to know some good methods to actually improve reaction speed in response to visual stimuli. So your biggest bang for your buck here is going to come from just physically training and getting your cardio up. Your brain works best when it has a good supply of nutritive blood, and the best way to do that is to have a decent cardio system. The tricky thing here is that you may see improvements in reaction time to certain visual stimuli in certain situations, but it doesn't seem to transfer across the board. So really the advice is to figure out what you want quicker reaction time in and develop that specifically. So if it's like a first-person shooter, play the first-person shooter a bunch and just really work on building up those automatic responses to things so you don't have to think about it when something happens. Joanna is wondering if I'd be willing to discuss my research process. Sure. It's very different if I'm doing something as a response to a book versus a standalone sort of thing. If it's in response to a book, read through the book, see what the references are, see where the points are, where it feels like a citation's needed, and go through, see if there is research on that or what the theoretical, philosophical version of it is. See what the references are. See what has been published citing those references. Am I familiar with a broader discussion of that? If I'm not, read the Wikipedia and then jump off from there. For standalone projects, basically go about it like I would a lecture. What is the starting point, knowledge-wise? What is the ending point? And what is the path from A to B? Do a bunch of research digging, see what the review papers are saying, see what more specific recent old papers are saying, and try to come up with the story from there. I want to make a how to do a research video at some point, so it will happen eventually. Base is curious about how I view the type of content that I and others like me make in relation to academia and traditional media forms and outlets. Building onto the question, they've noticed that in grad school that some papers, journals, and academics are more serious than others, and also how petty or vicious some researchers can be. So the heart of the question is if I think content like mine deserves to be recognized as more than just internet nonsense, don't use Wikipedia, or is academia sometimes unjustly lauded as the pinnacle of serious and rigorous thought and research? Both, neither, something else? So I think one of the biggest differences between YouTube as an info edutainment platform and academics or traditional media is there isn't really any sort of accountability. And this problem also plagues things like Facebook or TikTok, where just anybody can come up and say, like, I'm speaking what is currently understood to be the truth, and this is correct, when it might not be. And certainly that can happen in academics or the older media too. I just think it's a little more difficult to get away with it. Although I say that, and various news programs have had experts on to talk about any of the political topics and just experts. It would be nice to have some sort of credentialing system inside of YouTube to say that, yes, this person does indeed have training in whatever the topic is and isn't just talking virology out of their ass. So I think some of us are more than just like random internet person says things, but I can understand generally why we're viewed that way. But seeing as how I've gotten comments from people that psychology as a field isn't real, there's no winning. And I have some bad news for Eastern Trees, who built off the last question. They've noticed that a lot of psychology content on YouTube is of the more questionable variety. And thank you for saying that mine isn't. Are there any other similar channels out there that I would endorse? Probably if I watched psychology content. I'm typically watching like movie or TV reviews, video game stuff, funny animal stuff. I don't generally watch work, so sorry. I'll pin a comment for people to suggest their favorite psych videos because I am not being helpful. Pivoting to more general production, Lauren would like to know, what do I know now about my channel that I wish I'd known when I was just starting out? Either to do with the topics and people I cover, experience of being a content creator, or whatnot. The first thing would probably be that the mighty algorithm doesn't tend to detect copyright stuff over 9 seconds. Like maybe 10, but 9 seconds seems to generally be the safe place. As far as the other stuff goes, I feel like I'm still figuring stuff out. One of the things I think I did right was to have Patreon pretty much right from the beginning, because Google AdSense has never come close to what Patreon brings in every month. Other things I think I just picked up generally from life, like perfect is the enemy of good. You can sit there and edit and edit and edit, but at some point you're getting diminishing returns on improving the work, so just know when it's good enough. Remington would like to know what my favorite and least favorite parts are of the content creation process. My favorite parts mostly revolve around releasing the content, like the experience of premiering a video and interacting with those who are watching along in the premiere and the discussions that happen there, and also just favorable responses. It's nice. The warm fuzzy comments that sometimes get left on the videos is also a perk. Chief among least favorite is struggling with software or hardware. Adobe Premiere quits at least once a day when I'm editing. Sometimes it has the courtesy to actually error and close and give closure. Other times it just hangs. The only indication that it's not working is stuff not happening when you click stuff, but otherwise it looks like it's working. Sometimes it's even playing the video. Just, no, it doesn't want to work.
I don't really want to do the work today. I don't really want to do the work today.
Nasty comments are a not favorite part. Critical, I can deal with. Having a discussion, cool, but you suck and fuck the horse you rode in on. Like, no. Meh. Jonas would like to know what's an interesting tangent or tidbit that would not fit into a video I came across while making this year's videos. Well, the marshmallow cuttlefish thing was a tangent that became its own video. The videos have kind of blurred together. Like, time has no meaning at this point, so yeah. I think probably every video has at least one thing where it's like, oh cool, I didn't know this, or I didn't realize that, and sometimes they'll stay as a commented outline in my script, but at this point, I don't remember. Good question answering, you know what you're doing. Kersey wants to know how I see the channel for the future, and if there's any changes I want to make to the format. So I think the format is probably good. I mean, I might change the Pika at some point to something that I would have IP over, but that's just an idea. I'm very attached to Pikachu. More broadly speaking, I think this format is what makes sense to me with just like my opinion, whatever I'm responding to, what the research says. Like, this makes sense to me, and so this is how I communicate. Future channel stuff. More psychology worked in, because yeah, it's been basically a year since I've done like a psychology research video, and that's not good. Shame on me. I also have some media stuff slated, and I think that's always going to be something that occasionally pops in, but yeah, just keep at it. What's coming after Beyond Order, whenever that gets finished, not sure. Moving to more general stuff, Eric's wondering if I have an update for health and healthcare stuff. Well, the big news here is we're switching insurance at the end of the year, so I'm not going to be with Kaiser NorCal anymore because fuck those guys. And funny story, because I'm switching health insurance, I'm going to have to find a new doctor, and I'm a little worried about how long that might take. Hopefully it'll be fast, but it might not be. So I asked current doctor, like, hey, I'm switching insurance over. Would there be any way for you to help give me a buffer to find a doctor because I'm not sure when that's going to happen? When I moved here, my primary care provider basically doubled my prescription for 2 months to give me 2 months of a window to be able to find somebody. Another solution would be if she could be bothered to give me a prescription that gets me to like the 28th of the month and then a month refill after that. Like, there are solutions that work. Her response to my request was, well, it sounds like you need to find your doctor quick then. Data Foxy would like to know what my best dessert recipe is and how much it would cost to fund a lobster dinner to finish off Peterson's book. My best dessert recipe would probably be something by Alton Brown. We like the cheesecake as well as the apple pie. Those are both exquisite and not too terribly complicated. More broadly speaking, my favorite dessert would probably be something like churros or biscochitos. And the cost of the lobster meal is going to be pretty pricey because you're going to have to pay me to eat lobster. I don't do seafood, really, other than like 2 exceptions that are deep fried, so it's going to cost you. Cindy wanted to know if I was planning on doing a segment where I do Dr. Mr. the Husband's makeup, perhaps like a drag queen. Now, while Dr. Mr. the Husband is quite the looker with nice pillowy lips and a jawline for days, makeup's not really his thing. And as Cat responded, neither is being on camera, so those 2 things mean it's probably not going to happen. At least until I get doxxed. Disclaimer, that is not a challenge. Please do not do so. I like having a private life with my details not published on the internet. Thanks. Patrick would like to know what movie, comic, or anime would I choose to have a theme park experience based on? Well, because little me was obsessed with dinosaurs, the obvious answer is Jurassic Park. Having a bunch of dinosaurs everywhere doing dinosaur-y things would be cool as shit, but probably not the best idea. Getting into anime specifically, something with robots. So like Ghost in the Shell has the Tachikoma, Neon Genesis Evangelion has the Evas, like big cool robots. Being able to pilot them and do big robot-y things would be fun. Existential horror aside. Ooh, Awesomesaurus wants to know my wish list for Mass Effect 5. Not the big open worldness that Andromeda had, because a lot of those quests were samey. I think at the top of the wish list would probably be something similar to what they did with Dragon Age Inquisition, where you can go online and set the state of the world. What happened, what was the outcome of certain events, who's alive, like all of that stuff. Just set it online so you don't have to worry about all of your save files from whatever, and just able to explore the world in that way. Tied to that is the wish that the story be tied to those choices in meaningful ways. I know that's a huge ask for the development cycles, but it'd be nice for different choices you made, like the Rachni Queen and their situation, to have an impact meaningfully in how the world is progressing. Combat mechanic-wise, I think I enjoyed 3 the most. I didn't really like what they did with Andromeda, so kind of course correct back away from that. Moving on to kitty time. Kenny Inni, I think, wants to know if the cats are rescues or if we bought them from a breeder or where they came from. Our first cat was a calico who is sort of painted on that mug, and she came from an adopt-a-thon. Cleo's mom was taken in by a friend in undergrad, and prior to being able to get her fixed, she got knocked up, and so he let her have the litter of kittens, and we got Cleo. A little over a year after our calico ran out of lives, we got Izzy from a local nonprofit foster organization. We've generally liked to keep it at 2 cats because it seems to be a good dynamic, but Izzy really wanted a playmate and Cleo just can't be that. So then we were in the market for a cat, and Dr. Husband found a place that's in one of the malls in San Jose that does adoption stuff, mostly focusing on kittens and then worrying about the parents through a separate thing. And that's where we got Max. Lime Wielder would like to know what my favorite cat idiosyncrasies are. Well, Cleo has a ton because she's 18, so we've had time to build up those idiosyncrasies. Cleo is on a special diet and also gets to eat as much as she wants whenever she wants. And the way we do this is there's a room that she gets fed in, and she'll come let me or Dr. Husband know that, hey, I'm hungry. And she just comes right up and meh, meh. So then, oh, are you hungry? Okay. And then you go in, put her food down, close the door behind her, and she'll eat. Sometimes she just stays in there because that's where the heating pads are for the cats. And sometimes she'll finish eating and she wants out. So then she just starts knocking, kind of like she'll just the door, and the way it's hung, it makes a lot of noise. So she gets to come out. And a lot of times after she's eaten, she wants to go outside. And because she is far too stiff and arthritic to be able to do anything, we acquiesce. I mean, she's good at communicating with us. My favorite idiosyncrasy for Izzy would probably be what got her the nickname Titty Biscuits. If you know cats, this probably isn't going to be terribly surprising, but when I'm sitting in like the sofa or whatever, she will come, sit on me, and then proceed to make biscuits. Just really? Okay. And, I try to no, and she'll just keep doing it like up to below where my hand is, and it's just, all right. Max has to do with his playstyle, and if you've seen the outro parts for some of the Shrier vids, you've seen this basically. There's a kitty tower, and he likes the toy to go up to the top of the kitty tower where he goes and retrieves it, and then brings it down. And you just keep doing this until he is done playing, at which point he will take the toy off to a different part of the room, and that means he is done. It's the cutest thing ever. Will I do this entire video with at least one cat in frame? No, White Tree, I will not. I'm filming during the day today, and there are birds and squirrels to be monitored, so that's where they are. We're not going to talk about how many takes I have of trying to finish this video, but just we'll leave it at love you guys. You guys are awesome, and until next time, bye!